Ah, yes, old Maximilian Robespierre. I know everybody in this auditorium learned about this man in high school world history. Does anybody remember? Ring a bell? Nope. Well, let me enlighten you. So, this man was the figurehead of the French Revolution. There we go. Now we remember. Robespierre indulged the majority of his life in politics. He was the head of the Jacobin Party, and he was also the leader of the French National Assembly. He fought for universal suffrage, for unrestricted admission to the National Guard, to public offices, to the commissioned ranks of the army, and for the right to petition. He opposed the royal veto, the abuses of ministerial power, and religious and racial discrimination. He defended actors, Jews, black enslaved people, and supported the reunion of the Avignon, which is the French national newspaper. So, he sounds like a good guy, right? I mean, he's fighting for all the right reasons. We'll just have to see about that. Now, Robespierre's new power ideals quickly changed to old power once he obtained his leadership position. He gained popularity by promising the betterment to the common people and destroying the monarchism that was in place. But when he first came into power, he took full dictator control over the Jacobin Party and the Committee of Public Safety. Doesn't sound very progressive to me. Now known as the father of the guillotine, as we can see here, he used the committee to purge dissidents without trial. He failed to do what old power systems need to accomplish the switch to new power. Instead of assessing places in the shifting environment, he created governing bodies that only coincided with his views, not everybody's. When it comes to channeling critics, well, he sent over 30,000 people of his own people to get guillotined, and that was under direct influence. This just, of course, created more critics, as you would guess. Finally, his mobilization capacity was just underwhelming. He was trying to make these major advancements in their political systems at a time where it was not allowed at that speed. He developed from a pro-social to a pro-self with his obtainment of power, and that was the cause of his ultimate downfall. Now, ironically, he would find himself eventually in the guillotine after the public revolted to him. As you can see here, that's a newspaper clipping. So, Robespierre is remembered by many as one of the history's greatest revolutionaries, but I think we can argue now that he was not, in fact, a great leader. Ah, yes, the scum of the earth dictator who was responsible for the death of millions of innocent people. Now, how on earth could this guy be considered a good leader? I mean, come on. Surprisingly, you can actually find a lot of debate online topics where it varies on he was a good leader but just a horrible person. I mean, when it comes to analyzing Hitler, the adjective good rarely comes to play. Now, it is extremely difficult to look past his horrendous wake of destruction and despair, but let's just take a look at his leadership styles, traits, and tendencies to decide ourselves if he was at least a decent leader. Now, I know I don't have to go into much backstory to explain this man. We all know he eventually rose to power in a broken German state in 1933, thanks to Kaiser Wilhelm. Germany was in the midst of a major economic depression, and the German morale was extremely low. Hitler, the figurehead for the National Socialist German Workers' Party, otherwise known as the Nazis, was their main figure. Now, it was early on where Hitler obtained his charismatic leadership status. I believe this was a major reason of why he successfully obtained the role of chancellor. He had an executive voice with his fiery speeches, propaganda, and debates. Now, he was a visionary for the German people. He had great ideas for Germany to be bigger, better, and purer than ever, but he was also driven by his ego to, frankly, take over the world, which was not as pure as he wanted Germany. Now, his solutions at first were to rebuild the German economy that is, as putting German citizens to work, but he also planned for the rearmament of the German military in order to give the German people what they deserve. Now, another solution, or as we know, the final solution, was to start slowly and to build into his main goal, which was, of course, the extermination of outsiders, which he thought made Germany an unpure state. Okay, so yeah, I think we can agree that Hitler was extremely effective at making his message stick and building a following. But let's look at his individual traits and styles. In the beginning, it seemed as if Hitler was pursuing power for pro-social reasons, but as we know, it quickly turned to pro-self. But let's take a look at his 6 leadership traits in order to get a little bit better picture. First, we'll talk about his drive. Now, Hitler's determination and tremendous tenacity of purpose were 2 characteristics which described him through his governance. He was a man who was striving for power and command in order to have the power to be the commander of Germany and to be the conqueror of the whole world. He managed to climb all the way up from being a simple soldier on the front line to becoming the Chancellor of Germany and the commander of an enormous army. To say that the man had honesty and integrity is laughable. I mean, there's constant instances where he went back on his word, persecution of millions of people, defying defensive pacts. They're numerous here. But let's talk about the man's confidence. So he was an extremely confident man, as we know. Now, from the rising of his place of power to his military tactics and the fact that he got Germany out of their depression gave him, one would say, too much confidence. But let's take another look at his cognitive ability. Now, Hitler's intelligence is indisputable. I mean, he has made some ridiculous decisions throughout his campaign, but he also managed to get Germany out of the edge of economic disaster and made them flourishing again, from a beaten country to a world power in just a few years, which you could relate that to knowledge of business as well. Now, the fact that Hitler came from a frontline soldier to the Fuhrer shows his great will and capability to meet his objectives, but also great mind sharpness, since he was able to manipulate, even brainwash a whole nation in order to do so. Now we're going to talk about transformational leadership. In order to have their country stand again to their feet, Hitler appealed to the values and ethics of the German people. Despite the fact that they need for resurrection in Germany's economy was obvious, we could say that Hitler, instead of fulfilling his followers' higher mental needs and aspirations, he was focused on filling his own needs. With that being said, I would argue that Hitler was a pseudo-transformational leader, because leaders satisfy the needs of his followers and their well-being, but Hitler did not do that. He only promised to. Now, let's talk about authentic leadership. As far as we all can concur, Hitler was far from that. This was because, firstly, he promised he would help revive Germany. However, he did not say that he was going to be taking over all of Europe in doing so. Second, in order to be authentic, one must have self-awareness to know not only his strengths, but also his weaknesses, an ability that he lacked. And thirdly, most of the times, his feeling for conquering Europe to be the winner and the Fuhrer was overshadowing his rational thinking, which at the end brought the fall of his empire. All right, so enough said. Was he at least a good leader, or is he still a piece of hot garbage? What do you think about it? Okay, so here's what I think. I think that the man possessed several traits and tendencies that would make him a great leader, but he let his own self-interests take a hold of him. He exclusively focused on his own selfish goals for taking the whole of Europe under his control instead of the needs of his people. He took things too personally, overshadowing his rational thinking, so he had an intense rivalry with the rest of the world, because winning was so important for him that he would deny that he wouldn't do anything to achieve it. Now, these aspects of his character led him into the madness and paranoia at the end, and which was the contributing factor of his downfall. Side note, he was also taking meth, just like Wilhelm. Crazy. Now, Germany, thus making him a bad leader, I would conclude that he was definitely a bad leader for Germany just because his style didn't fit Germany's needs, but I would conclude that he would be a bad leader for just about any other nation in the world. So, what's the takeaway from all this? I want you guys to realize that people aren't always what they seem like. Too often, individuals are labeled as great leaders that never actually earned the title. Throughout history, we know that power has been the ultimate cause of death and destruction, and typically only get to view the side of those who are victorious. Now, the point of this today is to make you realize that history has been and will be decided by both great and poor leaders. It's just a fact. It is crucial that you, as individuals that hold voting power, are able to distinguish the difference between the fluff of achievement and true great leaders, because you never know, it could make a world's difference.